And welcome everybody back to Live with Tim O'Shea. This is episode 3. We're live, but we're not live, but we are live, and we have a really good show for you guys today, and we're going to jump right into it. So today is February 21st. Super Bowl was a couple of weeks ago. We're a little late on the recap, but we're just going to go over the Super Bowl a little bit. So the Chiefs are the 9th team to repeat as champions. That's right, the Kansas City Chiefs take home the Lombardi Trophy as they beat the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl 58 over there in Las Vegas. It's the first time a team has repeat since the 2003 and 2004 New England Patriots. So this was a special championship for the Chiefs. You know, I really didn't think throughout the year that they're just being the Chiefs, they're a contender, but they never seemed like they were a contender. You had the Ravens, you had the Bills, the Dolphins were atop the AFC for a long time during the season, and the Chiefs, they struggled. They struggled offensively. They couldn't really find a rhythm. They were dealing with a lot of adversity on the offensive side of the ball throughout the season. The defense remained stout, remained one of the better defenses in the league, thanks to the defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, and I think that's what really got them over the hump and made that late push into late November or December, and then ultimately winning the Super Bowl. But like I said, this was a special championship for the Chiefs. I don't think there was a Chiefs Super Bowl team that we've seen that was like this team, right? They led the league in offensive penalties. They led the league in drops. They didn't have a 1,000-yard wide receiver. Or a 1,000-yard rusher. They were a lot less dynamic than the Chiefs teams of past that we've seen that have won the big game. They didn't have Tyreek Hill for those big plays. They had to rely on guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Rashee Rice, a rookie, Justin Watson, guys who were kind of, under the radar guys, unknown guys, but the Chiefs ended up getting it done. So this was a really impressive Super Bowl victory by the Chiefs. And Mahomes didn't have a great year. He really didn't. I had him on my fantasy team, and I actually ended up sitting him in the fantasy playoffs for Jake Browning, a guy who was a backup quarterback to start the year. Mahomes really just did not have a great season. He wasn't an MVP candidate. They went on the road to beat the best teams in the AFC. They went through Buffalo. They beat Miami at home, but Miami was a good team. They went through Buffalo. They went through Baltimore. And Mahomes had done something that we haven't seen before in his NFL career. He went on the road and won these playoff games against the best teams in the AFC. Even when the playoffs didn't run through Kansas City, he still went out and proved that he's the best quarterback in the league, despite not winning MVP this year. Looking at the first 6 seasons compared to Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, so they both had 3 titles. Patrick Mahomes had 3 Super Bowl MVPs compared to Tom Brady's 2. 4 AFC titles for Patrick Mahomes compared to Tom Brady's 3. Regular season record, Mahomes has 2 more wins than Brady. He's 72-22, but Brady was 70-24. And then, TD to interception ratio, Patrick Mahomes has 260 passing touchdowns compared to Brady's 167. So, I'm seeing a lot of the comparisons. Is Patrick Mahomes already the GOAT? And the answer is no, absolutely not. He's not the GOAT. However, he is one of the greats. He's established this himself as one of the greats, winning that last Super Bowl. So it's his 3rd Super Bowl and his 3rd Super Bowl MVP. He's only one of 3 players in NFL history to win 3 Super Bowls and 2 MVPs, the other 2 being Joe Montana and Tom Brady, 2 of probably top 5 greatest players of all time already. So he's in that conversation. I don't see anyone better than him other than those 2 guys right now. If we do an all-time quarterbacks list, I think he has. Dan Orlovsky on ESPN had a great saying. He said, Pat Mahomes is the best start to his career in sports history, maybe other than Tiger Woods. And when you're talking about Tiger Woods, there's a certain level of athletes, professional athletes that by one name: Tiger, Jordan, LeBron, Gretzky, and Mahomes is kind of headed into that upper echelon of all-time greats. So when you put him in a category of not just an NFL player, but Tiger Woods, who's one of the best athletes of all time in any sport, he's heading in the right direction. Do I think he's the GOAT right now? No. What do I think that he needs to do to be in that conversation? I think he needs to win at least 5 Super Bowls. So at least 2 more Super Bowls. He's only 28 years old, and you hear him, he's doing all this before he's 28 years old. But, to be honest, Tom Brady, when he won his 3rd Super Bowl, he didn't win one for another decade. And we look, if Patrick Mahomes follows that same footsteps, how long is Andy Reid going to be there as the head coach? Tom Brady, at least when he went through that decade drought where they had good teams, they made it to a couple of Super Bowls, but that fourth championship eluded him for a while. He still had Bill Belichick by his side. He still had most of the same coaching staff throughout his tenure in New England. Andy Reid's kind of getting up there in his career. Is he going to last another decade if Patrick Mahomes can't win this fourth Super Bowl? I don't know. That's going to be a big challenge for him, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to talk about down the road. Maybe the Chiefs go out and they win the next 2 Super Bowls, and Mahomes is already primed to be the GOAT. It is what it is, but you never know. You never know what the future holds. So is he the GOAT at this moment? Absolutely not. No. Tom Brady went to 10 Super Bowls. We have to remember that. Tom Brady went to 10 Super Bowls. All right. Bill Russell won 11 championships in the NBA, and that's heralded as a huge, statistic. But that's the NBA, and they only had a couple of teams. They didn't have as many teams back then as they do now in the NBA. So, a couple of those stats are kind of faulty. But Tom Brady did it, in my opinion. I think it's the hardest sport to, repeat as champions is football. And you see it even at the college level. It's hard to repeat as champions in football. So I think that, Brady going to 10, winning 7, I still think that's probably the best accomplishment. He did one with the Buccaneers as well. We forget that. He went to a whole nother team and in his first year won the Super Bowl. And I think that really put Tom Brady not just as the GOAT. I think at that point he was already the GOAT, but that just kind of put him to another level. So there is a space between Brady and Mahomes for sure that Mahomes is going to have to chase, but he's already on that way. He's already on a roller coaster trajectory. The stats are going to be better. He's probably going to end his career, if he stays on this trajectory, as the all-time leading passer, all-time leading touchdowns. I really don't see anyone stopping him. He's probably the best talent at quarterback, the quarterback position that we've ever seen. And the Chiefs established a dynasty, which the Chiefs, for me growing up, I was born in 2000. The Chiefs have always been kind of a joke franchise, to be honest. They were maybe like a wild card team here and there. They had some stars. They had Jamal Charles, Priest Holmes, Alex Smith was there for a couple of years, but the Chiefs were never that team. The Chiefs' last Super Bowl came in 1970 in Super Bowl 4, so it had been a long time since the Chiefs had won a Super Bowl, and for them to completely change the franchise around, and we can see them being as one of the better franchises in NFL history if Patrick Mahomes can win a couple more Super Bowls, put them in that 6 is the magic number for all-time franchises. You have the Cowboys, the Niners, the Steelers up there. So if the Chiefs can get 6, they have the longevity to be one of the best franchises of all time. I also think there's one more thing about the Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes discussion, right? I think that the league right now is kind of in a weird transition period where you had guys from the early 2000s, 2010s, the great quarterbacks, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers. You had all these guys and even other great players who were kind of that was their peak years, the mid 2000s, 2010s. Those were the peak years for those players. And I think the NFL was a lot different back then. I think the NFL was a lot more competitive back then. You saw teams like the Giants coming in as a wild card team, winning the Super Bowl, beating an undefeated Patriots team. You saw teams like the Ravens coming out of nowhere with Joe Flacco, the Seattle Seahawks, right, with Russell Wilson winning a Super Bowl, going to 2 Super Bowls in the 2010s. So I think you saw Cam Newton, the Carolina Panthers, getting hot, going to a Super Bowl. I think the NFL was just a little bit more competitive back then. I think now it's a little bit more top heavy. And one way to kind of show this, right? I think that when Tom Brady was in his peak, when he had that 10-year drought of trying to find that 4th Super Bowl, you had guys like Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger. Those are 4 quarterbacks who are all-time greats, right? You can argue that all 4 of those guys are in the top 10 of quarterbacks all time. Ben Roethlisberger might be a little bit outside of that. Drew Brees is probably at the back end of that, but Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers definitely in there. Tom Brady, obviously the number 1. But, during that period, there was a lot more competitiveness in each conference. And you can see that, I think, by the MVP candidates. Right now, the league's just a little bit more top-heavy. It's the same kind of teams every year, kind of rotating. I don't see anyone really rivaling Patrick Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers, obviously an all-time great at the end of his career. The NFL's in a weird transition period, and I think Patrick Mahomes has really taken advantage of that, and he's shown that he is an all-time great and can beat these quarterbacks who will probably go down as great quarterbacks, but not all-time great quarterbacks. For example, Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, changed the way the NFL looks at, running quarterbacks, has changed the game in that way. Will go down in NFL history, probably going to be a Hall of Famer one day. He needs to probably win some bigger games, but Lamar Jackson will put him in the category as probably a Hall of Famer. But where does he rank all time? He's realistically probably not even a top 15 quarterback all time when it's all said and done, right? You got guys like Josh Allen, who's young in his career. He's got a lot to prove, but he has to get past Mahomes to win that. And I really think that the Buffalo Bills kind of Super Bowl window is almost shut, if it isn't shut already. I don't see him getting past Mahomes in the next couple of years. You got Rodgers, who's going to be in the AFC. And then we go to the NFC, and that's kind of a carousel of quarterbacks every year. I mean, Geno Smith last year got MVP votes, right? And he was a guy who was a free agent the year before, never really had a strong career. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a guy. But after that, who do you got? Dak Prescott. I mean, Brock Purdy's making a name for himself. A lot of guys that are just young in their careers and have a lot to prove. Like I said, the NFL's kind of in that transition period, and Patrick Mahomes is taking advantage of that. And you can look at it here. Let's look at the MVP candidates and just show, that the league's not dominated by the same couple guys. Like I said, the league's kind of in a transition period, right? And I feel like, a lot of quarterbacks are young in their careers. They have a lot to prove, and they have to get past a great like Patrick Mahomes. And I think you can drop Patrick Mahomes in any era and he would be just as good. However, I think he's taking advantage of kind of a weak NFL right now. I just feel like the league is young. It's in that transition period, and there's not, those all-time greats to battle Patrick Mahomes right now like there was with Tom Brady, and he's still, itched out 7 Super Bowl wins, 10 Super Bowl appearances. So I think the NFL was harder when Brady played, and I think it's a little bit easier at this period right now with Mahomes. And that's not to be said that CJ Stroud might get going, Jordan Love, these young quarterbacks, even Tua, Brock Purdy. These guys are really young in their careers, and I think that they might be able to, come up and rival. And we haven't really seen them. We've seen glimpses of greatness with them, but we haven't seen if they can be consistent and put the whole product together. But just to kind of attest to this, from 2012 to 2019, and that's an 8-year period in the NFL, there was 19 players, different players, who got MVP votes. Okay, maybe some of the same players got it throughout the years, but from an 8-year period, there was only 19 players that got MVP votes. Some of these guys: Adrian Peterson, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, J.J. Watt, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, Lamar Jackson got it in 2019, obviously. He had that unanimous MVP. In just 4 years, from 2020 to 2023, since COVID, since a lot of these greats have retired and the NFL's been in that transition period, there's already been 23 guys who have received MVP votes in just a 4-year period. The league's not dominated by those all-time greats anymore. These young guys are having a good year here and a good year here. They're not really being too consistent with it, though. I think that's something to really look at when you're discussing if, Patrick Mahomes can rival the GOAT right now. Tom Brady had to go through Peyton Manning. Tom Brady had to go through Drew Brees. He had to go through Aaron Rodgers. And I know they played in different conferences, but he had to go through Ben Roethlisberger on a yearly basis. These were in the Ravens defense, right? These were all-time great teams, all-time great quarterbacks, all-time great defenses. Right now, we're not seeing that. You could say Josh Allen is a great quarterback, but what does he have to prove for it? If Josh Allen retired today, is he even a top 50 quarterback of all time? I don't really know. I don't think so. Top 40 maybe. If Lamar Jackson retired today, is he a Hall of Famer? I don't know. He has 2 MVPs, but he hasn't won anything. And those are kind of the two only guys that rival him. Rodgers, obviously, but he's at the back end of his career. When you look at, is Patrick Mahomes the GOAT? There's going to be guys that come along that are going to rival him, and he has to beat those guys, really solidify himself as the GOAT. I think Brady had more of a gauntlet to go throughout his career than Mahomes has so far. Not to take anything away from Mahomes. It's not easy what he's doing, and he's doing everything right. But like I said, I think he just has a little bit of a ways to go. And on the 49ers side for the Super Bowl, it's not Brock Purdy's fault they lost. I've been hearing a lot of chatter on, social media, the internet, saying, questioning Brock Purdy. The dude was the last pick in the draft, a 7th round pick, and he's gone already in his second year to a Super Bowl. And to be honest, if he didn't get hurt last year, I think he would have went last year. And I think that team was a lot better than the 49ers team this year. And I think they probably would have won it the year before. This Mr. Irrelevant went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, who a lot of people are saying, is the heir to Tom Brady. He's getting just unwarranted criticism. And, Brock Purdy, I think, is a franchise quarterback. He is, I think one of the better quarterbacks in the league. He manages the game well. He doesn't turn the ball over. And I really think that this game came down to special teams, one, and clock management. I think when Kansas City started to come back a little bit, the 49ers got out to a good start. The Chiefs started to come back a little bit, and I think Shanahan got flustered. He got away from what was working. He had the Offensive Player of the Year in Christian McCaffrey. Just give him the rock. He had 18 carries for 80 yards. He had 80 receiving yards. When they kept giving him the ball, it was running the clock. They were getting 4 yards at a clip. I think that if they just kept doing that, kept finding different ways to run the ball, keep the clock moving, instead of going play action, getting sacked in the backfield, allowing the pressure to contain them. But this was an all-time game. It went to overtime. And a lot of people were giving Shanahan criticism for getting the ball first in overtime. I don't think that was a bad move, because the way the overtime rules work is if they go down and score, Kansas City matches it, they get the ball back again, and if they score, they won the Super Bowl. So I don't hate that. You're kind of playing, you're playing it safe. It's not college rules where you go on defense automatically. No, it's a little bit different, and I didn't mind that at all. I just think that if you do that and you're that close to the goal line, I think maybe going for it might be a better option to play it 4 downs when you're inside the 10-yard line, because you're playing for that third possession. You're not getting the ball to play for that first possession and try and get the Kansas City Chiefs on a field goal. You want to play for that third possession. So maybe when you're inside the 10-yard line, and we haven't really seen this before, this was the first time that this rule was implemented in the playoffs. I think that maybe you go for I think you go for the touchdown there. But a lot of the players came out after the game saying how we didn't know the rules. The Kansas City Chiefs knew the rules. Andy Reid, a veteran coach, been in the league for a long time, made sure that this was not just known, but practiced throughout the week, throughout the 2 weeks of practice. You have 2 weeks of practice for the Super Bowl. How do you not go over the new overtime rules? That's ridiculous. That's inexperience. That's laziness. That's on Kyle Shanahan. That's not on Brock Purdy. It's not on George Kittle. It's not on Deebo Samuel. That's on Kyle Shanahan. That's on the coaching. That's why right now he's 0-2 he's 0-3 in the Super Bowl, 1 as a coordinator, 2 as a head coach. So that's on Kyle Shanahan. You got to have your team knowing all the rules in overtime, especially with new ones. So for the 49ers, I think they're back in the mix next year. They got to keep Purdy. They got to keep Brandon Ayuk. I think he's their best wide receiver. I think Deebo Samuel, that contract is killing him right now. He hasn't really been the Deebo Samuel from the past. I think he dealt with a lot of injuries this year. So if he can get back on track next year, George Kittle was an all-pro this year, but I really didn't think he played up to his potential either. I think there's a lot of room for him to grow. I think there's a lot of room for him to improve this year. I think they had to give him the ball, not just more, but a little more consistently from game to game. Some of the games, George Kittle wasn't even a factor. Like the Super Bowl, he wasn't even involved at all. The Chiefs did a good job eliminating him from the game plan, but George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league, all pro, probably, if he keeps it up, probably future Hall of Famer as well. But I just think that they need to get him the ball more consistently, get him involved more consistently. And then Christian McCaffrey obviously back next year. So they're going to have probably more of the same group. I really like the 49ers and the NFC to come out of it again. But they got to learn from their mistakes. So moving on here, talking about Hall of Famers, the NFL Hall of Fame announced its Hall of Fame class of 2024. And boy, oh boy, is there some controversy here. So I'm going to go over the list. So the way the NFL Hall of Fame works is that there's 5 modern day candidates, so guys within their first couple of years of eligibility, and then there's 2 veteran candidates, and they go in. These guys have been, eligible for a lot of years. Decides that they go in this year. It's Randy Gradishar and Steve McMichael. Gradishar played for the Denver Broncos, was a linebacker for a long time. Then Steve McMichael was on that 1985 Bears defense. He was a defensive tackle, kind of overshadowed by guys like Richard Dent, Mike Singletary on that. that terrorizing Bears defense back in the 80s. So I'm glad he's getting his flowers. He's also battling ALS right now, so it's good to see that he's going into the Hall of Fame right now. But keeping those guys aside, we're going to talk about the modern-day candidates, because there is a lot of controversy here, and I have some strong opinions on this. The 5 modern-day players getting inducted for the Hall of Fame class of 2024 are Patrick Willis, Julius Peppers, Dwight Freeney, CT native, Andre Johnson, and Devin Hester. But where is Antonio Gates? You know, the San Diego Chargers tight end who changed the position of tight end and went down as one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, broke records and set records that still stand today. You know, the one that if he didn't come through, there wouldn't be a Rob Gronkowski, a Travis Kelce, a George Kittle without Antonio Gates. He absolutely changed the position of tight end, and he is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. He did not get into the Hall of Fame. I think it's an absolute travesty that Antonio Gates is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. If you look at all the guys who got in, Patrick Willis, Julius Peppers, Dwight Freeney, Andre Johnson, Devin Hester, when you look at all those guys at their position all time, is Patrick Willis a top 5 linebacker of all time? No. Is Dwight Freeney or Julius Peppers a top 5 edge rusher of all time? No. Is Andre Johnson a top 5 wide receiver of all time? Absolutely not. Antonio Gates is unanimously a top 5 tight end of all time. You know, it's him, Tony Gonzalez, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, and then, you know, Shannon Sharp, I guess you can throw into the mix. Maybe Kellen Winslow, you can kind of, that's a little bit debatable, but after those 3 guys, it's Antonio Gates, and there is no questions asked. Like I said before, he changed the position of tight end. You know, Tony Gonzalez got the receiving yards and the receptions, and he acted almost as a wide receiver, but Antonio Gates really took what Tony Gonzalez did and then made it an end zone threat. You know how tight ends are end zone threats and they catch a lot of touchdowns every year? That is because of Antonio Gates. He's the first all-time for tight ends in touchdowns with 116 career touchdowns. He's 3rd in receiving yards among tight ends all time, and he's 3rd in receptions among tight ends all time. Like I said before, he changed the position. There would be no Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. There wouldn't be these guys without Antonio Gates. He changed the position, by far the biggest snub in Hall of Fame history. Not having Antonio Gates go in as a first ballot Hall of Famer, it is a blemish on the Hall of Fame. And at this point, they should create standards or somewhat of a point system to be more transparent with the public of who gets in and who doesn't. I don't even think Andre Johnson was the best wide receiver eligible this year. You had guys like Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt, and Torrey Holt's been waiting for a long time to get into the Hall of Fame. Both receivers, I think, should have gotten in over Andre Johnson. Reggie Wayne has better stats in every major category than Andre Johnson, and he has a Super Bowl. The only thing that I can think of that they kept Reggie Wayne out of it is because he was a number 2 to Marvin Harrison, who arguably is a top 5 wide receiver of all time, for the first couple years of his career, and he had Peyton Manning, which I guess Andre Johnson never had a Hall of Fame quarterback like that and still put up great yards. Not saying that Andre Johnson isn't a Hall of Famer, but let's put things into perspective a little bit. The Hall of Fame has to be better. I don't know why in the world they wouldn't let Antonio Gates into the Hall of Fame as a first ballot Hall of Famer. It's utterly ridiculous. And Andre Johnson, like I said, if you look at the numbers between him and Reggie Wayne, who was an eligible candidate this year, Reggie Wayne has 8 more career receptions than Andre Johnson, over 200 more yards than Andre Johnson, and 12 more touchdowns, and a Super Bowl ring. What are we doing, folks? What is going on? And why am I not seeing this on any TV, any social media, nothing? I'm not seeing any of this. So you gotta be better, Hall of Fame. You gotta be better. Put the guys in who deserve to be in. Create a point system. Stop with this debating and all this stuff. It's right here on paper. Reggie Wayne was a better receiver all time than Andre Johnson. Torrey Holt has more Pro Bowls than Andre Johnson and led the NFL in receiving yards for 2 years, just like Andre Johnson, and was named to the 2000s All-Decade team. And He was the NFL receptions leader when he retired in 2003. Put Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne in the Hall of Fame before you let Andre Johnson in there. And I don't understand why they have such trouble with wide receivers. They made Terrell Owens wait for 2 or 3 years when he should have been undoubtedly a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's no doubt a top 3 wide receiver of all time from a statistical standpoint. So at the end of the day, I do have a bone to pick with the Hall of Fame. I think that's just utterly unfair. And you're going to throw a guy like Devin Hester, who, yeah, I mean, you can make the argument Devin Hester is the greatest kick returner of all time, but is that even really a position? And if you're going to put Devin Hester and Antonio Gates side by side, you're going to tell me that Devin Hester deserves to be in the Hall of Fame more than Antonio Gates? Now, that's not saying that Devin Hester isn't a Hall of Famer. Yeah, I think he'll get in down the road. But Antonio Gates by far should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And if I'm him, I'm thinking that that's disgraceful. I mean, he had a PED allegation late in his career, served a 4-game suspension. If that's what kept him out, Hall of Fame should be ashamed of themselves. So we're actually going to change up the sport for the first time. The last couple of podcasts, all we've talked about is football, but the season has come to an end. So we're going to switch to basketball. So recently we just had All-Star Weekend and the dunk contest. So I just kind of want to rant about the dunk contest for a little bit and just say that it's pointless. It's pointless. I think the whole All-Star Weekend is pretty pointless. I think that the best thing the NBA has going on All-Star Weekend right now is the 3-point contest. I like how they're taking like a WNBA player versus Steph Curry, and they're kind of doing like they did Kevin Hart versus Draymond Green a couple of years ago. I think that's a fun thing to do, and I think that's creative. But the NBA has to find a way to get the dunk contest better. I mean, it's really an embarrassment. The dunk contest was something when I was growing up, like I made sure I was home. Like I'm at home, I'm watching it. Don't bother me. Blake Griffin's jumping over a car. Like we're in it, we're watching. It's awesome. And the dunk contest now, I don't even know who's in it. They're taking like the 8th man in the rotation on like the New York Knicks to go dunk, and they're taking guys out of the G League. A guy in the G League, Mac McClung, is a G League player who's won it 2 years in a row. That should be an embarrassment to the NBA. The dunk contest used to be a rite of passage for young players. Dominique Wilkins, Dr. J, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady was in it. Vince Carter. These guys used All-Star Weekend as a rite of passage for themselves to go up against the best. It was competitive. It was fun to watch. And now you got these young stars like Anthony Edwards, John Morant, Zion Williamson just refusing to do it. And then the next day is the All-Star game, and the guys are throwing up 200 and the team's putting up 200 points, almost 400 points were scored. Why are you even playing at all? You go play basketball at the YMCA harder than these guys play in the All-Star game, and they're the best players in the world. I don't understand why. You're in the middle of the season. You're in shape. I get you want to rest. I understand that. The NBA also has to understand this is an entertainment product, and they're going to lose viewership because I didn't even tune into the NBA All-Star game this year. I watched a little bit of it because it was on in our living room, but it's like, what's to watch? Just a bunch of layups, a bunch of guys just like not playing any defense. If you had guys like Tyrese Halliburton, guarding up LeBron, this kind of transition period of generations of stars, kind of the next up, who's going to be the next guy, and there was some incentive behind it. Maybe, they do what baseball does, where whoever wins the All-Star game, gets home field advantage for the World Series. Maybe they do that for the NBA Finals. They gotta figure out how to change it. And I hate to say it, but it really all started with LeBron James. Like when LeBron James stopped taking the All-Star Weekend seriously, didn't want to participate, took it easy, I think it had a ripple effect, not just in the NBA, but throughout sports. I mean, I was just watching today, Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan were going at it in the All-Star game. Kobe Bryant used to play hard in the All-Star game against LeBron James, guarding him full court. Like these guys used to use this game as a rite of passage. And when LeBron James said, nah, I don't want to do it, I want to rest, and did all the players, the players initiative, the players movement and all this stuff, all the young guys are going to follow. This is LeBron James. He is the best player in North American sports right now. He is an icon. What he says, we're going to follow. If he doesn't want to do it, who am I? Why would I want to do that? That's exactly what they're thinking. And I think it's kind of naive to think that LeBron didn't start this trend. He was kind of the first high-flying superstar. Dr. J, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, all these guys did the dunk contest, played hard in All-Star Weekend, had a rite of passage. And LeBron just kind of came in and said, nah, I'm good. And then once Kobe Bryant, retired, the All-Star game went downhill. And that new generation of players came in and said that this is just kind of an opportunity for us to get some rest, which to the viewer isn't a good product. And at the end of the day, the NBA and all major sports are a product. I think there is some correlation between the NBA and the NFL All-Star games. You know, how when the NBA started to go downhill with their All-Star game and dunk contest, I think you started to see the NFL start to go downhill with their Pro Bowl. And now it's just flag football and it's like a bunch of games, and you know, it's to be honest, I don't really even think it's worth a watch. So in my opinion, I really think they should just eliminate, you know, any NBA players from the slam dunk contest at this point. I think they should throw in these professional dunkers like Jordan Klingon. I don't know if you've seen this guy. I mean, they're dunking behind the back. They're doing backflips and hula hoops and everything in between. They're doing dunks I've never even knew were possible. I think you invite the best of the best, throw them on the court, see who the best dunker in the world is. I think that would get more viewership than any NBA player doing a windmill or Jaylen Brown jumping over Kai Cenat. Like, come on. Like, what are we doing? Or any G Leaguer, you know, in the dunk contest. I think that's kind of embarrassing, if I'm being completely honest. And at this point, I think that the only way to save it is to get these kind of professional dunkers with dunks that we've never seen before, super creative, high flyers. I don't really see why not. And then add some incentive into the NBA All-Star game. Add home court advantage for the NBA Finals. Maybe there's, you know, a money incentive, something. There's got to be something to save it, because I think people are kind of getting fed up with it and fed up with kind of the selfishness of, you know, not giving the viewer a good experience. Like I said, it's a product. They got to put the viewer first. And people are paying thousands of dollars to go to these games that are just, you know, glorified shoot-arounds. I don't think that's fair to the fans. I don't think that's fair to the viewers. So I think the NBA really needs to take a hard look at itself in the mirror and find a way to change this. So that's it for today's episode. I know it's a little bit of a shorter episode, but we'll be back next week with some more content. We got a lot to talk about within the next couple of months. We got March Madness coming right on the corner. The Huskies are #1, even though they had a bad loss to Creighton, which I like. I like how they lost to Creighton last night. I like it because you don't want to go into the tournament, Big East tournament or the NCAA tournament, a little too hot. They needed a hard loss, so I actually do like it. However, we got March Madness around the corner, so we're going to have brackets and picks for that. The NFL Draft Combine is coming up, and the NFL Draft after that, so we're going to go over prospects. Might have some fun stuff in the studio. Might be doing some mock drafts. You never know, and maybe even some guests coming up. So we're really excited for that, and we're going to keep an eye on the NBA and the MLB, as well as, you know, the MLB baseball season is also right around the corner. So a lot of stuff happening in the next couple months. Very excited. So we're going to prepare for that. So thank you for tuning in to Live with Tim O'Shea. We'll see you later.